Yo guys, Superior David here. March of the Lich King has been out for just about a week now, so I thought today it would be fun to give my thoughts on what I think are the best new cards from the expansion. So I'll go through every class and just give one card that I think is just really powerful and that I don't think you should craft, but if you happen to have it in your collection, I think it's worth building around and trying to make work because I think we got a lot of powerful cards with the expansion. Well, some classes did, other classes, not so much. But you'll hear more about that later in the video. And in the meantime, just, like and subscribe if you like these types of videos because it really does help my channel out. And with that, let's get into these cards. So starting things off with Death Knight. When I was going through the Death Knight cards, I feel like most of the cool, powerful things were actually in the Path to Arthas set, but one card that really stuck out to me was not the Vampiric Blood in March of the Lich King, but actually the Corpse Explosion. While the Vampiric Blood is a very good card, I feel like Corpse Explosion is just a monster of an AoE, just being super flexible at dealing with small boards as well as just large boards alike, because its power scales relative to how many corpses you have. So truly the sky is the limit to Corpse Explosion, and whenever I'm going up against the Death Knight, I'm always just afraid of this card going into turn 5, and I feel like that fear just speaks oodles to its power level. Enough of the Death Knight, we're moving on to Demon Hunter, and for Demon Hunter, there's a lot of really powerful things that Demon Hunter got. Of course you could point to the Soul Eater Scythe, which I think is the big, flashy card of the set. But for me, I think the most powerful card and the best card that Demon Hunter got, easily the Unleash Fel. This Unleash Fel has really just changed how Demon Hunter can play games because first of all, Unleash Fel can go face, which, any card that can go face, definitely want to keep an eye on that. But I think Unleash Fel takes things to the next level because it's a very cheap AoE, and we got some access to very powerful, spell damage cards in the new set that can really scale Unleash Fel's damage very efficiently. And then on top of all this, you got the Mana Thirst 4, which by turn 4 you get lifesteal on this. And so I find with Demon Hunter decks these days, you can very much just say whatever to the early game boards. Just let your opponents just play on the board, play minions, especially if they're smaller ones, because you don't really care because you go Unleash Fel with spell damage in the middle turns of the game, and not only do you clear off your opponent's board and get damage face, but you also just heal back up, often to full life depending on how many minions your opponent has down. So for this reason, I feel like Unleash Fel is low-key a problematic card. I wouldn't be surprised if the mana cost or even the Mana Thirst cost of this eventually will go up, because I think as it stands now, it does a lot for Demon Hunter, and I think if you haven't played Spell Demon Hunter yet, check it out. The deck is a beast. Now moving on to Druid, I feel like there's only one card that I could talk about when we're talking about best Druid cards, and that would be the new legendary Anubricon. If you watched my video on the armor OTK Druid, you've seen the power of this card firsthand. His Battlecry, gain 8 armor this turn, your minions cost armor instead of mana, is just super powerful. When people talk about Druid doing broken shenanigans, a lot of the blame gets placed rightfully on Guff, who I think is a very powerful card, but with the printing of Anubricon, even if Blizzard chooses to nerf Guff, that Druid will be able to shrug it off so easily because Anubricon gives Druid so much mana cheating. You can consistently combo off with Anubricon on turn 10 with Astalor and Bran if you're able to get an Earthen Scales down on Anubricon, and I think that in itself is the really broken thing at Druid's disposal right now. So I don't know what I could say about this card other than, yeah, mana cheating still pretty good, but yeah, mana cheating still pretty good, and if you haven't checked out my video on the armor OTK Druid, definitely check it out because, oh my god, so freaking filthy. But moving on to Hunter, Hunter, it was of course a victim of the first balance patch, but I think all that said and done, I think the Shock Spitter will still probably end up being one of the best new cards for Hunter. Shock Spitter, of course, was a 2-mana 2/2 that just dealt damage face, and it scaled off of how many times your hero has attacked in the game. And again, I think at 3 mana, this card will still probably be good. I think right now people are just not playing the Shock Spitter because there are just some other more broken things in the meta at the moment. But once those get nerfed, I think Shock Spitter will definitely see more of a resurgence in play. People just don't like playing with nerf cards because it just it doesn't feel as good. But enough about nerf card KEKW. Let's go on to Mage, which Mage, I've played a little bit of Mage and it hasn't felt too good, but one card that does feel nice in Mage though is the new Vexillus. This legendary, it's very simple for what it does. 5 mana 3/5, your arcane spells cast twice. And doubling up stuff in Hearthstone usually pretty good, and I think Vexillus keeps with that theme. But I think right now this OTK Mage with the arcane bolts and the Vexillus is kind of getting pushed out by just some of the faster combo decks. Once those strategies get brought online, definitely going to want to mess around with Vexillus and Mage because I think he's still pretty powerful, allowing you to get just cheeky OTK OTKs with those arcane bolts over here. So now moving on to Paladin, which, Paladin, always the butt of many jokes in Hearthstone, but I think it got a very powerful card in the form of the Seal of Blood. Now, this is a 3-mana holy spell common, but its effect of giving a minion +3/+3 in Divine Shield at the cost of dealing 3 damage to your hero, I think is nuts. I've been running this into like most Paladin decks because it allows you just really snowball hard in the early game, and like even in the mid game, just being able to get like Divine Shield on a minion to like a value trade, I think is just really good. And then I've also been seeing like a lot of cheeky combos with like the Kotori Lightblade. You play him alongside the Seal of Blood like turn 5, and then you get like a lot of pressure on the board out of nowhere. And it's funny how like this one cheap holy spell I feel like has really elevated the Kotori Lightblade, where you can apply just so much pressure with this card. And I feel like Aggro Paladin is, people are experimenting with it, but I wouldn't be surprised if by the end of the expansion there's a more refined list that can really just beat opponents down, because this Seal of Blood I think is just so freaking nutty. And then moving on to Priest. Priest got a series of synergies that awkward at times. Some are pretty good, but I think one card that really stuck out to me so far is the Animate Dead. 1-mana shadow spell, resurrect a friendly minion that costs 3 or less. Now I think where I mostly see this used is to resurrect a Radiant Elemental, so you could just do some cheeky combo things. Really good in Blessed Priest, also like the OTK Sylvana Priest that hasn't really taken form, but Animate Dead I feel like is always going to be a card that you're going to have to keep an eye on. Because of the fact you can basically like resurrect tutor a card with Animate Dead, I think it's going to just be very flexible in Priest decks to come, and especially in like combo-oriented Priest decks to just give you like redundancy with your Radiance. I think it's definitely the best card that Priest got this expansion. And then moving on to Rogue. Oh my goodness, Rogue got just an embarrassment of riches in the expansion, as it seems to do like most expansions these days. But for me, it's between the Ghoulish Alchemist and the Potion Master Putricide. Ghoulish Alchemist, really good at in Miracle Rogue, just extending your pop-off turns with that 0-mana concoction. But man, for me, Potion Master Putricide, filthiest card, best card Rogue got in the expansion. The amount of value you can generate off this Putricide, just disgusting, because he's 2-mana 1/4. After a minion dies, add a concoction to your hand. When I first saw this card, I thought it was like your own minions, but the fact it's any minion means you can get just ridiculous value when you're like playing like your Serrated Bone Spikes on enemy minions, or maybe you get the concoction that destroys stuff. You can just generate just concoctions for freaking days, and the amount of value that Putricide gives Rogue is a little scary, and I wouldn't be surprised if eventually he'll be brought down in power level. I'm just going to talk in circles about it because I think Potion Master Putricide is just so filthy. So we're going to move on to Shaman, which, Shaman, a lot of people I feel like are poo-pooing a bit per usual, but I think Shaman got a very powerful spell with the Prescience, or Prescience. I don't know how you pronounce this, but this is a 4-mana shadow spell. Draw 2 minions for each that costs 5 or more. Summon a 2/3 spirit with Taunt. The fact that like Shaman, a class that has been made fun of for its lack of card draw, now has a way to tutor up minions, and then if they cost 5 or more, you get the an upside of a 2/3 Taunt. That's just it's just so insane to me. I was playing Evolved Shaman, Jombri's Evolved Shaman, where like you tutor up the Gnolls and the Sea Giants, and this card was just feeling like an MVP. So I think long term, keep an eye on Prescience, even though it's not like the most exciting card. It really just supports, a lot of Shaman strategies, in my opinion. So moving on to Warlock. So Warlock really didn't get too much love, at least speaking in terms of standard with this expansion. And while the class is actually quite busted, but if I had to pick like one of the best cards for standard and like what's going to do well now and in the future, I feel like this Shallow Grave is probably going to be one of the best cards that Warlock got in this expansion, because I see it doing work in like the Phylactery Warlocks, where you pop the mine with your Shallow Grave, and then you get to trigger the Death Rattle, and you just get that extra bit of damage in at your opponent's face. But like I think eventually Blizzard will probably support some sort of like Death Rattle Zoo deck a bit more. So I think that this card in the future stands to just get a lot better. As long as we get more Death Rattles, I feel like the sky's the limit for this card. So I would definitely want to keep an eye on it. So I guess with that, let's move on to Warrior, which, Warrior, let's be real, Warrior is not doing well, and the new cards really didn't help it. I think a lot of people were really hopeful Sunfier's Champion would be like the new Risky Skipper. That just really hasn't materialized. But one card I think will have potential in Warrior long term is the Sunfire Smithing. So this is a very simple card. Equipped a 4/2 sword, give a random minion in your hand +4/+2. So low key, this is like a super like aggressive card where you pay 4 mana and you get like a 4 attack weapons that you could just go face with most likely, or of course you could trade if you want to. But let's be real, you go face with a card like this. But I feel like the hand buffing can be very relevant for cards like Mr. Smite, as well as like the Crazed Wretch, where like eventually maybe there's like some sort of like charge combo deck that arises with the Sunfire Smithing. But of course at the moment I feel like Warrior's just struggling a bit. The cards it got didn't really amount to much, unfortunately, but hopefully like maybe in the mini set or after a balance patch, Enraged Warrior can finally get there. I wanted to get there so freaking badly. But anyways, moving on to the neutral set, I think I'll do 2 neutrals, because I feel like there's one powerful neutral right over here, Astalor. Best like neutral card in the set easily. I feel like he's just so flexible, and he's just a one card win condition that can just go into every class. It's like every class, like, yeah, I want to like deal 2 damage in the early game, want to gain armor in the mid game. Yeah, it feels all right. Then every class would love to just burst their opponent down. But of course, some classes can like use Astalor a bit better than others. Of course, there's the Armor OTK Druid, but I've also been seeing Astalor pop up in Miracle Rogue, actually, where you shout up the Astalor a bunch of times, get a few copies. Kind of funny there. I don't know if it will stand the test of time, but I cannot heap enough praise on this card. It's just really powerful. I don't think it's like to the point where it's like overpowered. I think the more the cards around Astalor are pretty broken. So I wouldn't be surprised if eventually like Brand gets addressed, or of course the Anubrakan. I'm 100% convinced that card will get nerfed. But there's one other card that I want to point out in the neutral set that I feel like it's powerful. It sort of flies under the radar because it's not like the flashiest card, but it's one that I think is really powerful in particularly Death Knight, and that's the Nerubian Vizier. So we got like a lot of undead minions in the set, but particularly Death Knight always just has access to undead minions. And so the Nerubian Vizier, 3 mana 2/4, Battlecry, discover a spell. And if a friendly undead died after your last turn, it costs 2 less. And the amount of times I see this like played in Death Knight and my opponent gets like 7 mana Scourge or like some other broken Death Knight spell, it just drives me freaking crazy. And it honestly just blows my mind that you get like some really powerful mana cheating from this card for just like, oh yeah, an undead dies. So I think the ability to get the mana cheating on the Nerubian Vizier makes it very powerful because it's a very easy condition to meet, especially for Death Knight, which is why I feel like you see this in like mostly Death Knight decks. But overall, I think it's just a really powerful effect at 3 mana because, mana cheating pretty broken in Hearthstone, as we've seen just time and time again. So I guess with that, guys, those are the cards that I think are the best in the new set. Let me know what you think about these cards down in the comments. If you agree, disagree, and of course, don't craft any of these cards. Just if you have them, I think they're worth like throwing into your decks or building around. And I guess with that, of course, like and subscribe if you haven't already. And in the meantime, stay superior. I'll catch you on the next one. Later. Get that